I have a couple of guests in studio with us again today, and as I was telling you in the last hour, we talk about firearms on Fridays. I guess there's a Firearms Fridays makes sense because it's got a little alliteration to it. But we're joined this morning by Forrest Anderson and Todd Eccles, and of course Forrest is the owner of Washington Street Pawn, as well as of course some other stops in town. We'll talk about that a little later too, as well. And Todd called Patriot Defense, right? And I think that the reason you call it that is simply because it's a good way to describe a lot of people out there who are looking to maybe emulate some of our founding fathers and just having that ability to defend themselves against any threat.
Well, sure, yeah, they want to practice and their Second Amendment rights. They want to be able to protect themselves. They want to be able to carry a gun I mean, it's our right. It's our constitutional rights, our Second Amendment rights. So that's basically kind of how I founded the name. Something I thought about a long time, and I think Patriot Defense fits quite well.
And of course, Forrest, you're the guy who's supplying those for people who have that need for defense too.
Absolutely. Try to, fit to what the need is. Try to find out what people want to carry, what their situation is, and then get them the right tool for the job.
And I always introduce you as, of course, from Washington Street Pawn, but it's not your only shop.
No, we have Magic Valley Pawn as well. They're kind of our sister store, and between the two of us, there's a whole bunch of used firearms, and all kinds of, everything from jewelry to guns and everything in between. In fact, yesterday I just came across several totes of medical supplies, all shooting related stuff. We have quick clot, we have tourniquets, I have literally totes full of stuff. If you want to build a first aid kit, swing into the shop today because I haven't even gone through all the totes yet. So
Yeah,
great stuff if you want to build a shooting range first aid kit, which you should always have with you. If you go to the
absolutely.
range, you should have a tourniquet. You should have some trauma type medical supplies. A couple of band-aids isn't going to do the job for a gunshot wound. So, come in and I just came across all this stuff yesterday, so I've got literally piles and piles of gear
We
for
were
that.
just talking off air that, and both of you can maybe comment on this. Hunting season's coming along, of course, throughout this region, throughout the Mountain West, and some of them starting in just a few days. This is the time of year. It's great for people who enjoy the sport of it, who hunt obviously to feed their families. But again, you're talking a little bit about need for first aid. Sometimes the downside of that is every year there are always these horror stories about people ending up, getting shot while they're hunting. An accident from a friend or even from somebody you don't know.
Or from themselves. And, there's a lot of youth. We've sold a ton of youth guns this year. There's so many great deals on youth shotguns and youth rifles that we've just sold a pile of those. But what that translates to is there's a lot of inexperienced shooters out there. There's a lot of kids walking with guns that may be loaded that aren't on safety. If you're walking out in the brush and climbing over logs and going through fences, there's a lot of things that they teach you in hunter safety that maybe get put on the side that people forget about. And having first aid supplies with you, worst case scenario, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So yeah, that's a big thing that's going on right now is a lot of kids out in the field, a lot of inexperienced, a lot of first time hunters. We get a lot of people in. I just had a guy the other day who was 40 years old. He'd never hunted in his life, but he was going to hunt this year. He bought a rifle, got all prepared. I went out and helped him sight in his rifle, showed him how to use it, and there's a lot of people in this country that we take it for granted. I think we're born and raised here, so I've been hunting my whole life. There's a lot of people now in this state and in this area that have never hunted before who are going out and trying it. So,
Todd, from the training aspect, um, is there a difference between training someone for home defense versus, hunting?
I mean, there's a few differences, but the base is always going to be the same. You need to be sure of your target. You need to be sure of what's beyond your target. You need to practice a trigger discipline. Keep the muzzle pointed away from people. Keep it pointed down. Don't point that gun at anything you're not willing to destroy or kill. So basic gun safety is going to be the same whether it's a shotgun, a rifle, a handgun. Okay. Um, just quick story, real quick. I was out this last Monday, opening day, with my son. He took his first deer, by the way. Pretty proud dad over here. But I was dragging his deer out, and he'd shot his deer, and I had my rifle too because I have a tag as well. He'd shot his deer. I figured the hunt was over, so I went ahead and unloaded my gun. You know, um, put it back on safety, slung it over my shoulder. I'm the dad. I'm dragging the deer out. The rope broke that I had tied to the deer. I fell backwards. I fell on top of my gun. The gun was unloaded. Safety was on. The trigger wasn't depressed. All was good. But if you have someone unexperienced who's going to leave that gun loaded, who's going to have that, maybe the safety's not going to be on, and they were to fall on that piece of sagebrush like me, bad things could have happened. You need to be safe. You need to be aware. You need to practice all those safety things that you learn in hunter safety.
We have a caller with us who'd like to join in the conversation. And do want to mention it's about 12 minutes after 9 o'clock. Guys, if you could grab the headsets. 61 right now. And of course, you're listening to Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Todd and Forrest here, of course, to both answer your questions or take your comments today. And caller, you're up next. You're on air.
Hi. Hey, I've got two old Model 70s, Model 19 357s, and then I have a 9mm Beretta. I'm kind of looking to trade down to something a little smaller that's got the accuracy and not quite so much power as the Magnums. Do you guys, if I bring those in, can we make trades?
Absolutely. We do, I would say about a third of our gun transactions come with a trade. That's one nice thing. First of all, our prices usually beat any of the big box stores or the competition. We don't make a huge markup. They come with a lifetime warranty, and on top of that, we'll take your trade and we'll give you fair. We'll show you the book. Obviously, we've got to make a little money on it because we've got to turn it. But yeah, we're super fair on stuff like that. So bring those. Those Smith 19s are great guns. I've got a Smith 18-2. I love those old wheel guns, and if you want to get something more concealed carry oriented, everybody's in that
I'm
business
currently
now.
carrying the Beretta, but it's still a little bulky for me. And the Model 19s, they got the combat hammers and triggers and all that on them, and they're just way too much to carry.
Yeah, and with those big hammers that came on those guns, there's a lot of, and the sights, those big tall sights, there's a lot of stuff to hang up on clothing. That's one thing when you're talking about concealed carry. You don't want something that you're going to try to draw and you're going to be picking out of your T-shirt and picking out of hang up on the pocket of your pants. So yeah, bring those in. And those double stack Berettas are big. They are big, wide, fat guns are not comfortable to carry.
Want to thank him very much for the call. And a telephone number for people looking to reach the program today, 736-0300, 736-0300. Todd, you mentioned something about, falling over on here's the thing. You have a comment you sent me earlier this morning that says, how do you carry chambered or not chambered? Now, there's probably some discussion here between a long gun and a pistol or a revolver, right? There's differences when you ask that question, I'm sure.
Right, yeah, and when I sent you that comment, and we're discussing, hunting and stuff right now, but when I sent you that question, I was referring to actual handguns. If you're going to carry, there's a lot of different ways people think on this. Some people come to class and go, "Oh, I'd never carry chambered. I'd never carry my concealed handgun chambered." I'm here to tell you, you should rethink that. I know it's ingrained in us to be safe, be safe, be safe. That gun, if it goes off and there's not a round chambered, nothing's going to happen. Well, if you need that gun in an instant, you need to have a round chambered. You need to. Some people, it's like they don't trust their gun. Maybe they don't trust the way they carry it. You need to invest in a quality holster, something that's going to protect that trigger, and then you can carry with a round chambered. The newer modern handguns today are not going to go off unless that trigger is depressed. So you protect that trigger when you're carrying it, however you're carrying it in your holster, whatever, and it's not going to go off until you need it.
It reminds me of something that, Forrest, you told me out at Shaw shooting a few weeks ago, and that is that people who are experienced with this are buying pistols now without safeties because, that's extra time you have to take to, bring the safety down and all of that. And if you're in an emergency, every split second is going to count.
And bottom line, if you go to a class, like, if you go to Todd's class, Patriot Defense, if you're manipulating that gun properly, it's not going to matter if you have safety or not, because you're not going to have your finger on that trigger until it's pointed at the target and you're ready to engage the target. But they've actually found guns with broken triggers. People have pulled so hard on the trigger, they've broken it without realizing all they have to do is make an eighth of an inch move with their thumb to take it off safety. In a panic situation, more hurdles in the way are just take more time and there's more margin for error. That's why carrying a gun chambered after you've taken the right classes to learn how to carry a gun chambered, in a panic situation, all you have to do is draw, point, and pull the trigger. And if that's an autoloader, even if you have a jam, you're going to have at least you're going to have one shot. But if you think about that, scenario of drawing your gun and racking the slide and then pointing it and then pulling the trigger. There's lots of stuff that can go wrong there. You know, that round that you're racking could jam. So now you got to rack it twice. Now you've got to clear the firearm. There's a lot of things that can go wrong there. Carrying a gun chambered should be a perfectly safe scenario if you've learned the proper techniques and the safety procedures to do so.
I'm going to throw this out there too. I agree 100% with what you said. And what I kind of say in my classes, tell people is, I've got actually just turned 3. I got a 3-year-old at home. And if I'm walking through Walmart or I'm walking through one of these other big box stores or I'm out somewhere and something happens and I have to draw my firearm and I'm holding my 3-year-old's hand, do I want to let go of my 3-year-old's hand to free up my left hand so when I draw with my right hand, I can reach over and run the slide? I do not. I want to be able to pull the 3-year-old behind me, shield the 3-year-old the best I can, draw with one hand, and fire that gun and not have to worry about it.
We have a couple of quick points to make too as well on all of this. But before we get to the other side of the break, I just want to have these two gentlemen tell us how you can get in touch with them because they're both in this business. And Todd, for people who'd like to know more about how to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
You can find me on Facebook. Look up Patriot Defense under Facebook. I'm on there. You can message me there. You can also give me a call. My cell phone number is area code 620-794-6223. And you can call me there, or you can actually text message me as well. I mean, both are fine. I do have a website. It's patriotdefense13.com. You can find me there. You can email me at patriotdefense13@yahoo.com as well. Most people tend to prefer the text message, and I'm cool with that.
And Forrest, you're on Facebook too.
Absolutely. Washington Street Pawn on Facebook, Washington Street Payday Loans on Facebook. Our phone number is 208-735-0012, or we're a brick and mortar store. You can stop by at 321 Washington Street, right across the street from Platt Electric. Stop in, say hi. My cell phone number is 208-404-1589. Get a hold of me anywhere. Or if you hear some loud music on the weekend, good chance I'm responsible. So stop in and I'll play your request and we'll talk about guns.
And of course, when I first came to town, I thought that Forrest's shop was the biggest marketer of old Volkswagen buses in the Magic Valley.
Absolutely. Well, one thing we love is cars. So I've always got some sort of car project I'm working on. I just bought a 64 Ford as my latest little project. So
I stopped and I took a bunch of the photographs of these and I sent them to friends around the country who love the older models. I got some great responses on that.
Nice.
We've got more coming up in just a moment. Forrest Anderson and Todd Eccles joining me, Bill Colley, in studio at News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. We're talking firearms, and we'll take some of your comments or questions, too, as well. We not only talk about firearms on this program, we're actually talking about classic automobiles. I think that's an idea for another show someday. 924. Joining us in studio, Todd Eccles, and of course, Forrest Anderson and Bill Colley. We're talking firearms today. And of course, you can also reach the program by giving us a call at 736-0300, News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. And can email me, too, if you've got a comment or question for us during the course of the show and you can't get to the telephone. Bill.Colley@townsquaremedia.com. Forrest, we talked briefly about safety a little bit earlier. You also wanted to mention, and this one caught me a little bit by surprise, but fire extinguishers play a role in all of this, too.
Oh, especially in the state of Idaho. I mean, one of the most popular things for people to go shoot is, they'll load up some targets. And there's a couple aspects to this. They'll load up some targets, go out to the desert and do some shooting. You're shooting like little missiles out there. Hit a rock, make a spark, it's easy to start a fire. So you'd have something there to take care of that. Also, one of my pet peeves, if you go out shooting with your kids, pick up your targets. Pick up your whatever you took out there to shoot. If you took tin cans, if you took targets, cardboard boxes, your dryer, whatever television set. I've seen the craziest things sitting out in the desert that people have shot. Please be responsible, because those public lands, let's face it, our bureaucrats are waiting for excuses to lock that stuff up and say, you can't go here anymore, you can't shoot here anymore. It's our responsibility to be responsible shooters. Pick up your targets. Pick up your trash that you took out shooting. Put it in a bag, call it home, and throw it away. Don't leave it out in the desert, because eventually The government agencies in charge of those lands are going to say, nope, no more shooting out here because you can't take care of business. No four-wheeling out here because you can't can't take care of business. We need to be responsible enough to and set example for your kids. If you go out shooting, don't leave your target sitting there because they're sitting there looking at it like, we brought this out here. How come we're leaving it out, in the sagebrush? Load it up, throw it in your car, and throw it in the dumpster.
Part of training too, Todd, is etiquette, I'm sure, because sometimes if you're at the range, you're dealing with 20, 30, 40 other people.
Yeah, you can. I mean, there's some ranges like that around here. You can be. That's a lot of people at once for a range around here. Most people just go out in the desert. But yeah, there's etiquette. There's the safety etiquette that we mentioned last week. And you clean up your stuff. No one wants to get to the range, maybe be the only guy there, go out to hang up his targets, have a bunch of tape and targets and stuff floating around. They got to clean up before they go to shoot. And pick up your brass when you're done. Pick up your brass. It's slippery. You got guys handling guns, handling maybe even unloaded guns. They don't want to slip and fall. Okay, that brass that rolls around on that concrete can create quite a hazard. Pick it up. If you don't want it, throw it in a. Usually there's a bucket there you can put it in. Give it to your neighbor if he wants. A lot of guys love that brass for reloading. I know I used to make mini trips to the gravel pits and pick that stuff up. So
Speaking of the safety, and you made another comment to me off air about children, and when you're with them, there's obviously you've got to be very aware, I guess, in that situation.
yeah, you need to know where the kids are. They need to know if they're going to be shooting. They need to have supervision right then and there. They need to know the range commands. Typically when I take even new shooters, not even children, but like new shooters out, and they're shooting like a semi-auto, I'll load one round at a time. You don't want it to surprise them. You want that one round to go off. You don't need that extra flinch to kick off another round. Just know where they all, know where they are at all times, and talk to them about safety before you get started. They need to know where that firing line is, what to do. We're here to have fun, yes, but this is not a game. This is this is structured fun is what this is. Um, if you don't mind, I'll mention even having guns at your house, or kind of where I was going with that comment was when you carry a gun, concealed carry a gun, and you're out and about town, and you're in your car and whatnot. Your children need to know and understand that. You need to keep that gun holstered. You need to not go to a store and say, "Well, I can't take my gun in there, so I'm going to leave it in the car. I'm going to leave my kids in the car too." That sort of thing. You need to be responsible with it. My kids at my house, they've all handled my firearms. They all know how they work under my supervision. Curiosity. If you kill that curiosity, you're probably not going to have any problems with kids. If you make it the big taboo subject, you can't touch the gun, don't touch the gun, don't ever touch the gun. What do you think they're going to do when you leave? They're going to go touch that gun. They're going to go see why it's so secretive. Okay, you need to kill that. You need to satiate that curiosity.
If their only experience with a gun is what they've seen on TV, then they're going to assume that if you get shot, you just jump right up and run off, and then next week you're just fine. You can't even tell that happened. You need to take those kids out and shoot. And like Todd said, don't hand somebody a semi-automatic firearm. They've never fired a gun before. Don't hand them that and let them start pulling the trigger. There's numerous videos out there on YouTube of people pulling the trigger. The recoil scares them. So what do they naturally do? They grip the gun harder because they're scared. Well, then the gun goes off again, and they may not be pointed in the right direction. Just last year, there was at the shooting range in Arizona. There was a guy, and it's a professional range. They let people shoot fully automatic weapons. 11-year-old girl, I think, 9-year-old girl. She has a fully automatic Uzi. He's standing right by her, but he doesn't have his hands on her. She pulls the trigger. The gun climbs, shoots and kills the trainer. She's scarred for life. He's dead, all because proper safety precautions weren't taken. If you're taking a new shooter out, one round at a time, let them get used to that. Let them adapt to that.
Hold that thought for a moment. We'll get back to that. We've got more with Forrest Anderson and Todd Eccles coming up on News Radio 1310 KLIX. It's 9:30 and 63. A couple of guests joining me in studio today. Todd Eccles, of course, he is with Patriot Defense, and Forrest Anderson with Washington Street Pond, and we're talking firearms. Bill Colley with you as well on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com at 63. We'll open up with a telephone caller in this segment, and then these two were just telling me they've got to get into some other topics too as well today. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air.
Yeah, this is Wayne, and first-time caller. I have another bit of advice on first-time shooters. When you take a person out dry fire the weapon several times. A good example is I took a good friend out to shoot my Glock. He put his thumb over the slide. If I had put a live bullet in there and he pulled the trigger, he would have ripped off the end of his thumb. So make sure your shooter for the first time is handling the gun properly, pulling the trigger properly, and all aspects of it by dry firing. So again, it saved a trip to the hospital.
Want to point out that that dovetails well with what you two were talking about at the end of the last segment.
Yeah, and most modern firearms, with the exception of a few 22s, that's great practice in your home. You can dry fire those guns hundreds, thousands of times, and it doesn't hurt them. They're just fine. Um, that's great practice, and that's really good advice. Make sure whoever's going to shoot has the basic state, they can operate the safety. They know how to grip the gun correctly. They know all the basics that they need to know before that gun goes bang, before it's even loaded and ready to go bang.
It kind of brings to mind one of my favorite instructor things that I do in class. Someone's shooting and they have a bad flinch. I usually grab their gun from them, tell them I'm going to load 2 rounds in there. I'll throw a dummy round in, hand it to them. They think it's loaded. They pull the trigger, which essentially is going to be a dry fire, and you can tell really quickly whether or not they're flinching or not. So just like Forrest said, dry fire in your house. Obviously, make sure there's no ammo even in the room. Make sure the gun's unloaded. Keep it pointed in a safe direction. But you can spend hours dry firing. And that's going to improve your shooting a bunch.
We were just talking off air about when we were all young, we all played with toy guns. And I mentioned a friend of mine in Reno didn't want her son to have them. And there's a lot of concern today is that they look so realistic that they're a danger. They're almost a hazard. And so if you're training your children in firearms use, you better tell them there's certain places you don't take them outside, even if they're toys, because it can cause a problem, right?
Yeah, there was a shooting a couple years ago in Cleveland. A kid in a park, police approached him. He turned around and pointed a toy gun at him. He's a big kid. He's only 13, but my 13-year-old is 5'10", 185 pounds. You didn't know, he'd think he was a grown man, so, and they don't make the same type of decisions that we make. They just turn around, like that kid just turned around and, the police fired. It was a really unfortunate situation. But, you don't want your kids, say, walking down the street playing with their toy gun, because in this current climate, someone's going to call the police, and the police are going to do their job, and if somebody points a gun at them, they've got to protect themselves, and they've got to protect the community. So, yeah, if they want to play with a toy gun in their house and they're doing it properly, they shouldn't, just because it's a toy, you still have to observe the exact same rules that you would if it was a real gun. They can't be pointing it at each other. They can't be pointing it at you. They can't be, that gun's always got to be pointed in a safe direction.
Todd, I got to tell you, when we were kids and we were playing with toy guns, and I used to have these big, long silver revolvers that would have caps in them and the like. But I would try to pretend I was Bill Hickok, like from TV or something, and you hold the revolver at your waist and point it. The other part about this is kids are going to learn a bad habit in the first place because they're imitating somebody on TV with a toy.
Oh, exactly. Like you said, you got to treat them, even though they're toys. You got to teach them the safety. You got to teach them how to hold it. Teach them to keep that finger off the trigger, and that's going to relate to when they actually get into an actual firing handgun or firing weapon of some kind. Another thing I like to encourage, you can go out there. I went out the other day and I bought one for just kind of I didn't have a blue gun at the time, so I bought a BB gun, and it's never actually been fired, but I use it to show things, in my classes. And that I had to put an orange tip on it. The thing was all black. It looked just like a real gun. If you're going to go out and you're going to buy your kids a gun, you may look at them and go, this one's got an orange tip on it, or this one's some weird, crazy color. It doesn't necessarily look like an actual gun. Just be real careful, because if for some reason your kids do have them in the front yard or do have them and they're walking down the sidewalk, that could translate into big trouble.
We want to point out that maybe the Super Soaker is a better alternative because people can recognize that as a toy and can have just as much fun with it. Quickly, we'll have more coming up in a minute. We're going to talk a little bit about, what people who own firearms may have to expect following the election in just a few minutes. We're about 20 minutes away from 10 o'clock, and it's 63. Take more of your telephone calls, too, as well. Joining us in studio, Forrest Anderson, Todd Eccles. Bill Colley with you as well on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. But just a reminder, 4th Annual Anything Potato Festival at the Fairgrounds this weekend, starting tomorrow at 5:30 in the afternoon, runs until 8 o'clock. Sample all the potato dishes and vote for your favorite potato soups, salads, desserts, and more. This is a fundraiser for the Twin Falls County Fair Foundation, and that'll help make improvements at the fairgrounds. Just wanted to mention we're going to open up the segment of the program with a caller. And, of course, if you'd like to reach News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com, telephone number 736-0300. Forrest Anderson and Todd Eccles in studio with me, Bill Colley, this morning. And, caller, you're up next at 9:43.
Yeah, I've got a safety question about this. You see a lot of this 223 green tip ammo. Is that safe to shoot? I have like a Mini 14, and then I have a bolt action Savage varmint rifle. Is that ammo safe to shoot in that?
5.56 is, I've shot more green tip than I can even imagine, because for a while there you buy it super cheap. If the rifle is chambered in 5.56, you're going to have absolutely no problem. 5.56 has a little bit, the case dimensions are a little bit different. It's a little bit higher pressure. I've never seen a 223 rifle that wouldn't function in, but rule of thumb is if that weapon is not chambered in that caliber, then you shouldn't shoot it. Most of those Mini 14s are chambered in 223. The action is plenty strong enough to handle the 5.56 cartridge, but it's going to come down to headspace issues with that case.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Want to thank you for the call, and we'll squeeze another caller in here. Caller, you're up next, and you're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. When I was a teenager, I had I believe it was a Marlin semi-automatic. I've been out shooting. I came back home to clean my gun. I'm down in the basement, and all of a sudden, the gun goes off, and apparently there's still another shell still in there. And I could have sworn that gun was empty. So I know I put a round up through my basement flooring up towards my bedroom. So I guess the point I like to make is that make sure these guys, when you're done shooting, make sure your gun is empty. And ever since that happened, now when I come back from hunting or shooting, I take my clip out, and I'll slide that lever back several times just to make sure that there's nothing still up in the chamber, because like I said, I thought it was empty. And anyway, it's just something that I do for myself. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good thing. You had a kind of an accident there. We want to avoid that. You should always, cycle that action. Unload it, take out the magazine, whatever it be, handgun, rifle, and run that action. 2 or 3 times, and then you can actually do a physical check. Not only run the action, you can actually take your finger, you can poke it, stick it up in there and feel around and make sure there's nothing there. Rifles, even shotguns, sometimes they have a tendency. Sometimes they don't grab and they don't unload. They won't unchamber that round. I had a gentleman actually take my class a few years back, and he also farmed and stuff. And he took my class. He went home. He was going to clean his gun, and he made the mistake. He had a semi-automatic handgun, and normally what you're supposed to do is take the magazine out. You're supposed to cycle the action 2 or 3 times to unload it, and then on his, he had to flip the lever and pull the trigger to release the slide. Well, he got busy doing some other stuff. Got distracted, and what he did was he picked his gun, he unholstered it, he cycled the action, unchambered the live round, grabbed another round, loaded it, dropped the magazine, flipped the lever, pulled the trigger, and put a hole through his leg. Safety, safety, safety. You've got to follow safety. You got to do stuff repeatedly, and if that's cycle the action 3, 4, 5, 6 times, whatever you deem is safe to make sure that gun is unloaded, that's what you have to do.
I wanted to point out, we got about a dozen minutes left or so in the program, and the subject has come up the last few days, and there's a lot of discussion that if you trust the polling numbers, we're going to have a Democrat in the White House and perhaps even more Democrats in the House and Senate. Now, these two aren't here to talk about the politics of that, but ultimately we're going to have somebody picking Supreme Court justices, as many as 3, maybe more. And when it gets back to the Second Amendment, we've had a very narrow 5-4 majority for a long time on these issues. I think there was a case a few years ago. It might have gone 9-0. It might have been Heller, but that's rare. And there's a lot of concern. What would happen if somebody says, well, you're not the militia, therefore uh, local governments, state governments, federal government can suddenly say, well, tell you what, I don't know if they'd have us turn them in, but it could be much more difficult to actually sell firearms, to train with firearms. All of these things are suddenly in jeopardy, I would assume.
Yeah, I think I mean, let's face it, most of the national level politicians we have, I mean, had we had a choice, we wouldn't be voting for anyone. But bottom line is we need to look at the people this election cycle. It's important. There's going to be all it takes is one Supreme Court decision to change everything. The way that firearm ownership is looked at in this country. I mean, all they have to do is redefine that Second Amendment, and it changes everything. So it's important to look at our politicians, even at the local level, because there can be lots of like county ordinances, city ordinances, things that can be changed. You get the wrong people sitting in those seats, and they can change those things, and it makes everything more difficult. Out in my neck of the woods, out in the country, it's funny at the county level. The county has started to dictate if you can ride motorcycles on your own property. Ride your own motorcycles on your own property. I mean, that's ridiculous. Why you'd buy property and the county comes out and says, no, you can't ride your motorcycles on your own property. So, like Jack Johnson's a friend of mine. He's running for county election. It's important to find guys like that. He comes to our trap shoot out there every year. I know he's a gun guy. So, of course, he's going to get my vote. Find people that are going to support the reason why we all chose to live in Idaho, because of the freedoms that we find in this state that you won't find anywhere else. But that's changing. So let's make sure the people that we elect that let us keep those freedoms.
Jack's also one of those guys still fond of revolvers too.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, he's was a police officer for years and wheel gun. I'll tell you what though, you go to that trap shoot out there. The scouts have their trap shoot the 5th of November out there at Murtaugh Lake, and he comes out there, bring his old hunting shotgun, and you get a lot of these guys from the local gun clubs, that shoot every week, shoot trap. And then you get some old farmer climbing out of his truck with his Model 12 gauge. He's been shooting since 1960, and he just cleans their clocks with that old gun. It's pretty amazing.
Todd, from a training standpoint, they could put you out of business.
They could, and that's, I could be doing all kinds of stuff and be put out of business. But yeah, I mean, it could definitely slow down. Something I think about quite a bit. So, get your training in now. It could. Everyone needs to go out and be real conscious of who they vote for. They need to look at the issues, think about what's important to them, and really study the candidates, locally and nationally.
I would think, though, and Bernie Sanders made a comment because he was my congressman when I lived in Vermont, and then he later got elected to Senate there. And he was a big proponent in Vermont of the Second Amendment, which people wouldn't believe that in a lot of cases. But he knew that if you're going to get elected in a state like that where people hunt and fish, you better be on that side of all these things, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You need to. And I don't want to get too political here. You just got to be real careful because sometimes these guys will say one thing and they will go the other direction. You do political all morning, right? I mean, you've seen it, you know it. Just be prepared, stay educated. I don't want to have to recommend that everyone go out and buy 55-gallon drums, a shovel, and a bunch of Cosmoline because we don't need to be hiding these things. I don't want it to get to that point. So just know that your vote has an impact on the future. So.
Yeah, and Sanders, by the way, has said he thinks there should be separate rules in different parts of the country. If you have a gun culture, keep it. But if he thinks that we should change at least to allow people to make those decisions. So if you have a political change in Idaho, where you think that they would always be behind Second Amendment rights, but if you have a political change, if you have, well, I don't think we'll see someone along the lines of Cecil Andrus again for a while, but it does happen from time to time, and then all of a sudden somebody on the state level says that too, and all of a sudden they follow his lead and say, yeah, you know what? In Idaho, maybe we'll have a different law than they have in Utah or Montana.
Well, that's nonsense to treat the Second Amendment right any different than you treat any other right. Where if the freedom of speech becomes inconvenient, well, we're going to limit this right because now this right's inconvenient. You can't treat the Second Amendment any differently than you can treat any of the other freedoms that were afforded in this country. You can't, take the freedom of religion and say, well, we're going to limit this now because it's not convenient for our agenda. Those rights are enshrined in our Constitution. So, not to beat this horse, there's plenty of politics out there. We don't need any more of it on this show. But, what I'm saying is look at the people that are running. Make sure that you choose people that are going to support your views on that.
Did you have something you want to add to that?
Yeah, just real quick, I've seen the pictures and stuff. I've talked to my dad, and, back in the day, the Second Amendment was so important. They would have shooting ranges. A lot of high schools would have shooting ranges in the basement, and they'd teach basic gun safety and marksmanship, and they'd have a little .22 range down in the basement. But we used to teach religion in schools too. So, it's changing. We just need to educate ourselves and vote accordingly.
We had when I was growing up, a lot of high schools had their own rifle teams.
My kids are a member of Xavier Charter School's Trap and Skeet Club.
Guys would they'd come to school with them.
Yep.
They'd bring them on the school bus.
Yep.
And that wasn't considered to be unusual.
And they were safe with them too.
Yeah, I'd go pheasant hunting every day. My shotgun would be sitting on the front seat of my car because I was going pheasant hunting after football practice.
Yeah, me too.
So that's all changed now.
I'll never forget, one of the guys came to school and he was showing us a knife he had. Very nice knife. And guys would carry them around, and our teacher walked over and said, "Well, take a look at what I've got." So it was common. Hey, we got to mention, because we touched on this last week, a big event tomorrow for breast cancer research taking place just outside of Jerome.
Yeah, at the Magic Valley Practical Shooting Association. That's the local shooting club here for handguns and pistol caliber carbines. They're having a breast cancer awareness shoot tomorrow morning at 9 at the Jerome Gun Club. The range for the Magic Valley Practical Shooting Association is on your right-hand side as you come in. You'll see the big sign, the gate there. It's going to be a lot of shooters. It's a great shoot tomorrow. If you're not an experienced shooter, you can come out and watch. The first time you come shoot with them, it's free. Bring your pistol, a good holster, 3 magazines. They've got these amazing little courses they've got set up. You're moving down hallways and through doorways. Come out and shoot. The money all goes to a great cause, and really great bunch of people out there. So if you want to take Todd's class at Patriot Defense, learn the basics of what you're doing, and then you want to practice on a weekly basis or a bi-weekly basis. They shoot the first and third Saturdays of every month. Take Todd's class, learn what you're doing, jump in, come out there and practice every other week on some real world scenarios, moving through doorways, moving down hallways, shooting moving targets sometimes. It's a great way to practice with a great group of people that'll kind of walk you through the process.
Of course, when you were referencing trap shooting earlier and the like, and skeet shooting, you had moving targets there too as well. You got to learn how to lead that target.
Yeah, exactly.
That takes some patience,
that's something no one ever practices, but that's something that's really important. If you're really practicing to defend yourself, most likely the person you're defending yourself from isn't going to stand there as a static target and let you shoot at them. They're going to be moving. You're going to be moving. It's great to practice those skills.
Dynamic. It'll be very dynamic. No one will be just standing there. I mean, it's real easy then, because what's that stance Todd showed me? What's that grip? Let's, everyone hold still for a minute.
Do you recommend people bring like the some ear protection in that situation?
I mean, if you're going to go shoot out there, yeah, it's required out there.
Whenever you go shoot, honestly, your ears or hearing's an amazing thing. Whenever you go shooting, I mean, we touched base on this at the beginning. Fire extinguisher, first aid kit, safety glasses, hearing protection. You should never pull the trigger on a live round without eye protection, ear protection, and some form of first aid there. So, those are just not negotiable.
Quickly, people, if they'd like to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Forrest at Washington Street Pond. John and Wes, my other 2 guys, are down there. You can come see us at Magic Valley Pond. Go see Jimmy. He's got a ton of really cool used guns right now, old stuff. See us on Facebook, Washington Street Pond, or 321 Washington Street in Twin Falls.
And Todd?
Facebook under Patriot Defense. You can give me a call or text message me at area code 620-794-6223. My next class is actually on October 29th. Give me a call. I can answer any questions. We can get you signed up.
Saturday, 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Yep.
Okay. We want to thank everybody for tuning in this morning and joining us. We'll do this all over again next week.
Awesome.
Friday morning.
Great.
You'll actually be joined by Steve Millington I'm going to be in Boise because that's a late game next Thursday night.
I've got to say one thing. Shout out to the Murtaugh Red Devils Pee Wee football team playing tomorrow for their undefeated season at 10 o'clock on the Murtaugh football field.
You notice he didn't mention that I'm going to see BYU lose next week. So it's coming up on 10 o'clock. God willing, the creek don't rise. I'll be back here Monday morning between 8 and 10 o'clock. And, of course, Rush Limbaugh following the news at 10 o'clock this morning.